cartoon doorways of myself. Yo, what's up? It's someone that's no one, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report was sent in by DogHorseFish, where he took LSD, Salvia Divinorum, and alcohol. And here's the full report details. Alright, so welcome to quite the Salvia report today. DogHorseFish is a classic subscriber, and I'm happy to be covering his report finally. He actually has helped with a lot of the clips we use, so big shouts out to bro. But today, he has this super trippy experience with Salvia. Just the way he ends up and how he describes things, it really is kind of mind-bending in itself. It is kind of hard to conceive, but really shows just how existential and weird Salvia can be. He had a tab and drank a little before the experience, but I really don't know how much this actually impacted his trip. It's a good report, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy it. So without further ado, let's dive right into this. Trip report. Earlier in the day, I took 100 micrograms LSD swallowed on a paper tab. About 10 hours after the LSD is when I smoked the Salvia. I had a beer an hour or so before the Salvia experience. I smoked through a water pipe, all in one hit, held in for however long. I decided earlier this night that I would smoke Salvia, so I placed a bag of it next to my no-face bong. I went upstairs to eat dinner and watch a romance show with my family. We watched the show, and they moved on to watching something called the CMAs, Country Music Awards. They've always been fans of country music. Me, not so much. So to avoid listening to country, I went downstairs and immediately remembered my plan to smoke Salvia. My last trip on Salvia was about a year ago, but I was seeking something more with this trip. I loaded my bowl with .07, Salvia Divinorum 20x extract, branded purple sticky Salvia. Then proceeded to listen to a few trip reports on Salvia from my favorite YouTuber, someone that's no one, smiley face. After laying down in my room and listening to a few positive and a few negative reports, I thought to myself, I'm just filling my mind with other people's perspective while they're on Salvia, right before planning to smoke Salvia myself. No good. I want to experience it on my own without external influence. So I stopped listening to the reports after going through 2 or 3 and decided to read up on Salvia and the proper way to consume it, how I'm supposed to feel, or what I can expect to see, how much to take, and how I should respect the plant, as it's extremely potent and has been used traditionally for years by many different indigenous groups around the world. After reading all of this, I then decided I should at least unload my already packed bowl to weigh out the contents, which I did not do when loading the bowl. I just compared the visual amount of my last dose to this one and tried to double it. Stupid, I know. After taking the dry leaves out of the bowl, I took my scale and transferred the substance between containers and reweighing, just to make sure I get the same weight off my scale. I finally felt comfortable and believe I had a dose of .07 perfect. Now I know what I'm taking. So I lay down and meditated for a while before carrying my bong outside to my hay shed. I decided the hay shed was a good place because it was far enough from the house just in case I started acting up, as I have no trip sitter to call me if anything goes wonky. We have horses, and I take care of the horses, so the hay shed was a place I always went to get their food and such. It's a comfortable place that I know, a place I cannot get hurt in if I black out. And it's a place where I can stay inside out of the rain, and sit or lay down while being half inside and half outside. Allowing fresh airflow and ambient noise is something I always do for DMT, and I know Salvia is arguably more intense than DMT, so I treated it the same and took that extra precautionary step to feel comfortable, as I hear Salvia can be very uncomfy. So I walked to the barn from my house. I have a lighter, my phone, my no-face bong, yes, no face from Spirited Away Studio Ghibli, and a water bottle. I'm wearing my comfy clothes. Sweatpants, sweatshirt, another button-up hooded flannel atop my sweatshirt, loose Adidas Boost. I got to the barn, propped both doors open, and placed some hay down as bedding in hopes that it will remind me of who I am and what I do on a regular basis. I'm me, and I take care of horses. After situating myself, I decided I'll start off sitting on the doorstep, which was raised from the ground. So when I sat on the floor of the hay barn, my feet were firmly planted on the ground. But I could also lean back into the hay bed I made. Or if I need be, I could get up and start walking into the dark night. It was a chilly night, accompanied by typical night sounds, rustling leaves, bat squeaks, occasional owl hoots, horses stomping around, and the normal creaking of our wooden hay barn. If I haven't already mentioned, it's about 9:30 p.m. PST, dark early this time of year. I live in Washington, so it's lightly raining and chilly almost always. So after figuring out where I wanted to sit or lay while tripping, I put on some very mellow down-tempo music, genre, prelude, and I turned my phone on airplane mode so nobody could disturb me and my experience with Lady Salvia. After sitting there and breathing in deeply through my nose and out through my mouth, I still felt anxiety-ridden. I remembered that I actually have a few types of sage growing in our garden, so I got up and walked over there to grab a small leaf of cedar sage, Salvia romeriana. After getting the leaf, I took a moment, bowed in respect to the sage plant, and started walking back to my spot in the hay barn. I went through my mental checklist to further calm myself. Setting, check. Environment, check. Mindset, check. Ha, nobody can really be prepared for salvia. I sure wasn't. I then put that one leaf of sage in my mouth and chewed it a little bit to get the flavors. It tasted of piney lemonade with strong herbal flavor, almost bitter-like. The flavor from the cedar sage helped get my mind off the fact that I was about to try Salvia Divinorum again for the first time in about a year or so. The flavor was becoming a little overpowering, so I took the water cedar sage out of my mouth and placed it next to me on the floor. I figured since I had used its flavor to calm me down, I'd keep it near me while tripping in respect to the sage plants, which Salvia Divinorum is a sage plant if you don't know. I'm just sitting looking out into the dim light night, observing and listening before taking my salvia bowl. I tried breathing exercises to help lower my heart rate, but my heart rate was still kinda high. I finally managed to lower my heart rate, so I picked up the bong and lighter, but immediately felt my heart rate pick back up. Now I'm sitting with the bong and lighter in hand, waiting for the right time to toke when my heart rate goes down again. I take a few more deep breaths in, and realized I'm not going to get myself calm to my satisfaction. So with a medium fast heart rate, I decided to go for it. I put the lighter to my bowl and inhaled deeply in one large hit until the bowl stopped flickering orange, pulled my mouth away from the bong, and took another deep breath to hold in. At that moment, I put the bong away to my right so that I wouldn't bump it over and break it somehow. Directly after I took my hit and placed the bong down, literally 5 seconds after, it starts. I leaned backwards onto my hay bed and looked up to the half ceiling and half outdoor tree foliage, with nothing in my hands, just staying calm and anticipating. 10 seconds go by, and I think to myself, weird. I usually feel this uncomfortable, prickly static sensation all over. Maybe this was a dud. And as I'm finishing that thought process in my head, I immediately get torn away from my body. I'm now looking at myself in a third-person perspective as a floating conscious, observing my living body sitting in this exact hay barn doorway. But I wasn't just sitting in the doorway. I had become the whole entire doorway that duplicated into many doorways. My whole physical body was the outline of the doorway, the doors themselves, and I was what the doorway was leading to, outside. I was leaning over the opening of the doors, looking out, but I was seeing my body as what it was outside of the doorway. It was like looking at a slouched cartoon of myself, smushed into the shape of my hay barn doorway, leaning over and looking to where the doors were leading. But I was also what the doorway was open to. The best way I could describe this is, imagine you draw a picture of yourself standing up straight, but then you lean it over and stretch it out to make your body the shape of a half oval arch. Then duplicate that image by 30 times, and stack each image on top of each other, so you're not just looking at one singular image of yourself bent over in an arch shape as a doorway, but instead it's 30 images of you directly next to each other, all bent over in the same arch type shape and position. That's what I was seeing from a third-person perspective, with no memory of what was going on or who I was. I was literally looking at 30 cartoon versions of myself as a doorway, all stacked next to each other, not being able to move, just looking outside, which outside was actually another cartoon image of me. Super confusing visual. It made me feel uncomfortable for a moment. And at that moment, when I first felt uncomfortable from this visual, my first rational human thought came through to my conscious third-person perspective. And it was, wait, this is wrong. I'm supposed to be something else. When I said this in my third-person perspective, the duplicated cartoon image of myself as a doorway said back to me in an unfamiliar voice, "No, you're supposed to be this right now," in a cheerful tone. After I saw that cartoon version of myself turn towards me in my third-person perspective self and say that, I had this odd feeling of resentment. Not necessarily me rejecting my reality of becoming these doorways that led to my own outdoor self, but I felt uneasy, like I wasn't going to return back to my actual body, and that I was just going to watch myself be those duplicated doors forever. But as soon as I had this odd feeling of hesitation, I also felt this sense of comfort like, I know this won't last forever. I should sit back and watch while I can. Enjoy it. So that's exactly what I did. After that brief moment of forgetting who I was, and realizing that I was an overlapping doorway to myself, and also that brief moment of comfort after discomfort, the realization that this is a profound experience that I should embrace soon washed over me. I thought to myself, I shouldn't just enjoy this visual while it's here. Accept it, even if it feels weird. Then, everything started to dissipate. Those 30 doorway versions of myself slowly diminished to about 5 of those slouched archway cartoon doorways. From 30 images of myself to only 5 images of myself, dwindling down in a really interesting accordion effect. I could see each duplicate of myself, one by one, melting and overlapping into each other, until it got down to only 5 images of myself as the doorway. By the time I was at 5 duplicates, I remembered who I was and what I had consumed. But as I was watching the last few duplicates of myself as a doorway melt back into one, my visual suddenly turned back into my normal vision, which was just me first person on my back, looking at half of the hay barn ceiling and half outdoor tree foliage. I was instantly trying to think about how I can describe this, as it was very hard for me to comprehend what I had just seen in that short 5 to 10 minute experience. It took me a few minutes to collect myself, and it took me even longer to figure out how I described this to others to read or listen to. It made little to no sense to me at the time, so describing it in words was an overwhelming goal. Writing this, I am now about an hour past the trip, and I've been thinking, what is the meaning of this visual? What message is Lady Salvia trying to give me? Think about this. I was looking at myself in third person as a doorway, but I was the doors, and I was also what was on the other side of those doors. Trippy visual, and hard thought process to follow, but my understanding is this. I am my own self-advocate in life. I create my own doorways, and I can open and close each doorway I create in life willingly. I am also what's on the other end of those doorways that I had just created. I am what I make of myself throughout my time living. And whatever I made of myself in the past, present, and future will be forever and always be on the other side, even when I'm no longer existing in this body on this land. In simpler words, my spirit, that third-person perspective I was in while experiencing Salvia, will carry on after this life, no matter what doorways I choose to create for myself during this life. Hopefully this made some sort of sense, as this was extremely hard for me to explain. I hope you enjoy listening to my experience. Bless up and much love.